As commuters cross the Midpoint Memorial Bridge connecting Fort Myers to Cape Coral, they're greeted by the sight of a 20-foot tall statue depicting 5 Marines and a Navy hospital corpsman raising the American flag on Mount Suribachi, the highest point on Iwo Jima, a small island located 660 miles south of Tokyo. Many think that it's a replica of the 78-foot tall Iwo Jima Memorial near Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia. But it is, in fact, one of 3 originals that were created by the renowned sculptor Felix de Weldon. This is the story of how the city of Cape Coral acquired this illustrious monument, from how it came to be here, how it was nearly lost from decay and neglect, to how it was saved twice and finally repaired and restored to its current grandeur. On February 19th, 1945, about 70,000 Marines invaded the small Pacific island of Iwo Jima, which was under control of the Japanese Army. The island was a tactical objective due to its airfield, which was used to intercept B-29 bombers going to and from bombing raids to mainland Japan. By capturing the island, the Allied forces would not only prevent attacks from the island, but would also give them a base from where the Japanese mainland could be reached by B-29 superfortresses. One of the first objectives in the attack was capturing Mount Suribachi, the highest point on the island. On the morning of February 19th, the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions invaded Iwo Jima after an ineffective 72-hour bombardment. The 28th Regiment of the 5th Division was ordered to capture Mount Suribachi. They reached the base of the mountain on the afternoon of February 21, and by nightfall the next day had almost completely surrounded it. On the morning of February 23rd, Marines of Company E, 2nd Battalion, started the tortuous climb up the rough terrain to the top. At about 10:30 a.m., men all over the island were thrilled by the sight of a small American flag flying atop Mount Suribachi. That afternoon, when the slopes were cleared of enemy resistance, a second, larger flag was raised by the 5 Marines and a Navy hospital corpsman. Sergeant Michael Strank, Corporal Harlan H. Block, PFC Franklin Sousey, PFC Renee Gagnon, PFC Ira Hayes, and PHM 2C John H. Bradley, USN. The raising was witnessed by news photographer Joe Rosenthal, whose Pulitzer Prize-winning picture of the flag raising would become a symbol of the war in the Pacific, and it was soon used by the American government to sell war bonds and to promote the war effort. Of the 6 soldiers shown on Rosenthal's picture, only 3 survived the war. The other 3 were killed during further battle at Iwo Jima. Depicted in the photograph are PFC Renee Gagnon, PFC Ira Hayes, pharmacist mate, 2nd class, John Bradley, PFC Harlan Block, Sergeant Mike Strank, and PFC Franklin Sousey. Unfortunately, Block, Strank, and Sousey died within days of the flag raising in combat on the northern end of the island. Hayes was also sent to the northern end of the island and was wounded in a mortar attack, but he survived, as did Gagnon and Bradley. Rosenthal's photograph inspired sculptor Felix de Weldon, who created his iconic statue, the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, honoring more than 6,000 Americans killed and 25,000 wounded in the Battle of Iwo Jima of 1945. Felix de Weldon was a Vienna-born sculptor who immigrated to the United States via England and Canada and became a U.S. citizen in 1945, enlisting in the Navy during World War II, becoming the official artist for U.S. naval aviation. He was stationed at Pawtuxet Naval Air Station in Maryland in 1945, when a copy of Joe Rosenthal's now famous photograph of Marines raising the American flag atop Mount Suribachi came over the Associated Press wire. When I saw the picture, I immediately recognized it would capture the imagination of the American people, as de Weldon had told the Washington Times in 1995. The strength, the unison of action, the will to sacrifice, to hold our flag high, that symbol of our liberty and freedom. Inspired by Rosenthal's powerful image, de Weldon worked non-stop for 3 days and nights, creating a 3-foot-tall wax model using only materials he could find, a mixture of floor wax and ceiling wax. The model so impressed his commanding officer that he sent de Weldon and the wax statue to Navy headquarters in Washington. De Weldon said he never forgot the sound of the applause as the model was wheeled down to the commandant of the Marine Corps. The commandant was so impressed that he transferred Mr. de Weldon into the Marine Corps. Government officials asked de Weldon to create a 9-foot plaster version of the statue, which toured the country to help sell war bonds. After he was discharged from the military, Congress passed a joint resolution commissioning him to do the large-scale sculpture of the historic event captured in Rosenthal's Pulitzer Prize-winning photo. It took him and his assistants 9 years to complete the statue, 6 years for the model and 3 for the bronze. More than 100 million people have visited the statue since it was dedicated in 1954. It stands as one of the largest bronze cast statues in the world, weighing more than 100 tons. The 32-foot-high figures are shown raising a 60-foot bronze flagpole. The flag at the top of the pole flies at half-mast 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, by presidential proclamation. The entire memorial is about 78 feet tall. The figures stand on a rock slope above a granite base, and in the statue occupy the same positions as in Rosenthal's historic photograph. Ira Hayes is the figure farthest from the flagpole, with both hands reaching up. Franklin Sousley is in front of Hayes, to the right. John Bradley is in front of Sousley. Michael Strank is in front of Hayes, to the left. Renee Gagnon is in front of Strank, and Harlan Block is at the foot of the flagpole. The entire cost of the statue, $850,000, was donated by U.S. Marines, Friends of the Marine Corps, and members of the Naval Service. No public funds were used for this memorial. Much like the city it calls home, the Iwo Jima statue has seen years of ups and downs in its long history. The statue and Cape Coral have a rich history together, dating back to the beginning of Cape Coral itself. In the late 1950s, 2 brothers, Leonard and Jack Rosen, the owners of the Gulf American Corporation, began to transform a vast landscape of swamp, scrub, and pasture land located across the Caloosahatchee River from Fort Myers into the housing development of Cape Coral, Florida. One of the many ways they could entice potential residents to come over to the Cape for a look was to build a tourist attraction for the new community. The idea of having the Iwo Jima statue in Cape Coral was to create a garden of patriots in the Rose Gardens. The Rosens hoped that this would attract military retirees to the area and purchase property in the newly created city of Cape Coral. The Rosens' first step in creating the Garden of Patriots was to create a centerpiece for the property. To do this, they contacted sculptor Felix de Weldon, the very same sculptor who had created the famous Marine Corps War Memorial that sits just outside the gates of Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. In 1960, the Rosens were successful in commissioning de Weldon to create a smaller version of the famous statue from the original cast. The statue would be placed in the Rose Gardens, which opened its gates in 1964. After many months of work, the statue stood completed and was placed in the Rose Gardens. The Rosens had a dedication ceremony on June 14, 1965, to mark the occasion. The garden successfully attracted visitors from far and wide for many years, but as the city grew, the garden's waterfront land became more and more valuable, until the attraction was closed amid rising expenses on Labor Day, 1970. The land had turned into an upscale residential neighborhood, but the gardens and the Iwo Jima statue both quickly fell into disrepair. The statue remained standing in the Rose Gardens and was all but forgotten until 1980. It was during this time that Mike Gemmell, an employee of North First Bank, was out appraising a piece of property in the Rose Gardens that was in bankruptcy. While touring the property, he stumbled upon the statue. After years of neglect and vandalism, Gemmell was not quite sure what he had found. He soon recognized the crumbling pile of stone was indeed the Iwo Jima statue. Realizing the historic significance of the piece, Gemmell says he felt an immediate sense of obligation to preserve and restore the statue to its past glory. Committing to restore the statue, Gemmell had no idea of the journey he was about to embark on. The first step Gemmell took to restoring the statue was securing the statue and have it removed from the dilapidated piece of land where it sat. Making this happen was no small task considering the property was in bankruptcy, and the trustees considered the statue part of the property itself. Gemmell spent time negotiating with the bankruptcy trustee and was eventually able to obtain the statue and have it removed. On June 14th, 15 years to the day of the original dedication in the Rose Gardens, the statue was moved to the North First Bank property on Del Prado Boulevard, near Vizcaya Parkway. Gemmell began doing extensive research to find out the history of the statue, discovering that the statue was one of only 3 original replicas of the Marine Corps War Memorial in the world, with the other 2 statues being located in Quantico, Virginia, and Parris Island, South Carolina. The next step in Gemmell's journey was to find out the cost of restoring the statue. Because of its condition, the statue would need to be almost entirely rebuilt. Gemmell found repairs on the statue initially were going to cost upwards of $25,000. However, the final tab exceeded $60,000. Hearing of his quest, local community leaders soon got behind the project and began making it a true community project. Although concerned about the increased expense, the bank remained committed to completing the project without outside finances or contributions. With the publicity generated about the statue, it was not long before the Marines found out about the statue and its condition. Hearing that one of their national treasures had fallen on a state of near disrepair, the Marines sent down representatives from Washington, D.C. to verify the statue's authenticity. Once confirmed, they became staunch supporters of the restoration efforts and were able to garner wide attention through national magazines and television. During this time, Gemmell contacted Felix de Weldon, who, after hearing Gemmell's story, flew down to Cape Coral to see the statue for himself. Upon seeing the condition of his work of art, de Weldon fell to his knees, exclaiming, "What have they done to my children?" So moved by the state of the statue, de Weldon sent 2 of his own people down to restore the statue. The 2 men spent the next 11 months living in Cape Coral and working day and night restoring the statue to its original glory. Once the restorations were complete, the statue was moved to the south side of the bank property and dedicated in a ceremony held on May 31st, 1981. So impressed with the restoration efforts, the Commandant of the United States Marines sent a Marine general to represent them at the dedication ceremony. The United States Navy also sent one of their admirals to attend the ceremony. The statue would spend the next 17 years located at the bank property, and in 1998, the statue began its next chapter in Cape Coral. In the late 1990s, the city came up with a concept of creating a Veterans Memorial Park due to the large number of veterans that call Cape Coral home. The city decided on an area on the eastern side of the 4-mile ecological park near Veterans Parkway to be designated Cape Coral's Veterans Memorial Area. On February 22, 1998, the city took ownership of the statue and, in partnership with the Marine Corps League, once again refurbished the statue. At the same time, the statue was moved to its current location at the 4-mile ecological park at the foot of the Midpoint Bridge. The idea of moving the statue to the park was to make the statue the centerpiece of a new Veterans Memorial Area. Over the years, the Veterans Memorial Area became home to the Iwo Jima statue, as well as a number of memorials honoring those who served in the United States military. In 2004, Hurricane Charlie swept through Cape Coral. The hurricane caused millions of dollars of damage to the city, and unfortunately, the Iwo Jima statue did not escape the hurricane's wrath either. The hurricane caused considerable damage to the structure of the statue. Combined with the years of sitting outside, again the statue was in need of substantial repairs. Cracked in more than 150 places, legs held together with tie straps, fingers completely falling off of the soldiers, it was in a state close to irreversible disrepair. At this time, Cape Coral was also facing some tough economic times. The city did not have the funds to repair the statue, and things looked bleak for the historical piece of art. It was at this time a small group of volunteers known as the Craig T. Fuller Foundation began raising funds for the statue's restoration in honor of their friend and retired Marine Craig Fuller, who talked repeatedly about restoring the statue. Craig grew up in Cape Coral. He attended Cape Coral High School, and at the young age of 17, after talking to his dad into signing for him, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. After spending 8 years in the Marines, Craig decided it was time to give civilian life a try. During his time back in Cape Coral, the one thing Fuller became passionate about was the condition of the Iwo Jima statue at 4 Mile Cove Eco Park. He was extremely disturbed by the condition of the statue in the aftermath of Hurricane Charlie. It used to make Craig crazy to see how the statue was deteriorating, says friend Lisa Cohen. He used to say he was going to lead the way to getting the statue restored. It was during this time the events of 9/11 transpired and changed everyone's life, including Fuller's. He was in the middle of starting his new career as a boxing promoter when the United States government asked him to work as a private contractor overseas. Now he was faced with a dilemma. The business was beginning to become successful, and he knew that going overseas could possibly spell the end of his professional dreams. It was a decision that was tough for him to make, but in the end, his patriotism and love of his country won the battle, and he decided to, as he called it, serve the flag. Craig served in Iraq and Afghanistan, where he oversaw a number of security details and worked security jobs for both domestic and foreign presidents and dignitaries. He was also widely considered one of the top snipers in the business. He always put 110% into whatever he was doing. He never walked away from a duty and would take on any task regardless how big or how small. While home in Cape Coral between jobs, Fuller would still comment on the condition of the Iwo Jima statue, saying again to his father that there would come a time when he would head up the cause to restore the statue. Unfortunately, Craig would never see his wishes fulfilled. On April 24, 2009, while working contract security in Afghanistan, Fuller was tragically killed by gunfire. However, Craig's wishes were to be fulfilled. Through sheer tenacity and hard work, the small group of Fuller's friends and family created the Craig T. Fuller Foundation and raised over $60,000 towards the statue's renovations. With total costs of restoration priced at just over $100,000, the group approached the city of Cape Coral about financing the remaining balance. In December of 2010, Cape Coral City Council committed to putting in the remaining $45,000 to get the statue restored. By March of 2011, the city had a team in place to oversee the project, and the restoration process began. Leading the charge of the project were DJ Wilkins, a local sculptor who has worked on such projects as Uncommon Friends at Centennial Park in Fort Myers, and many of the sculptures on display at the Harborside Convention Center. Joining Wilkins was Don Meek, a concrete restoration specialist. After hearing of the project, Meek went to Pullman and volunteered his services to be the engineer of the project. Rounding out the trio, retired Marine George Colum, who also serves as the historian for the local Marine Corps League. Colum was there to lend his expertise as well as document the process. The trio began plotting out what needed to be done to restore the statue. In the beginning, we did not know what to expect, said Wilkins. What the trio found when they began their analysis was that the statue was in much worse shape than originally expected. At one point early in the process, there were serious doubts about the statue and whether or not it was salvageable. Not able to surrender to the fact that the statue was beyond repair, the three put their heads together and laid out a plan to bring the statue back to its past glory. In the beginning, we changed the overall plan on a daily basis. It took a while until we were able to get it right, says Wilkins. After several trial and error periods, it was decided if they were going to save the statue, it would need to be completely brought down to the core. We completely rebuilt the statue, from the inside out, says Colum. Working through the summer heat, day in and day out, restorations were finally complete in November. Wilkins, Meek, and Colum believed they had a statue that not only brought back its former glory, but was actually more structurally sound than the original work. It was a long journey. In the end, it turned out to be a good journey. I'm proud to be part of the work done on the statue. These folks did a fantastic job, says Colum. During the ceremonies to celebrate the completion of the statue's restorations, Marine League Commandant George Cullum summed it up. If not for the efforts of the Craig T. Fuller Foundation, none of these restorations would have happened. Chances are the statue would not be here today. For the Craig T. Fuller Foundation, the statue also brings a bittersweet emotion to the table. Craig is still touching lives with efforts from beyond. It's amazing what he's still doing. And he's not even here, said Fuller Foundation member and Craig's best friend, Joe Sabella. I think the fact that the statue has been totally restored and looking great brings him back. Now they have a kinship with this statue, and the work he always wanted to have completed is now done, added Colum. At one very solemn point in the ceremony to commemorate those killed and wounded during the battle, George Cullum had managed to obtain actual sand from Iwo Jima's Green Beach 1, the closest landing beach to Mount Suribachi. The sand was ceremoniously poured into a bronze urn by each of the participants. The urn then placed within the monument and sealed with a specially designed commemorative medallion to be permanently enshrined. Additionally, as a token of appreciation and remembrance, small containers of the sand were presented to each of the restoration participants. During the ceremony, Cape Coral Mayor John Sullivan declared February 25, 2012 as Iwo Jima Day and Craig T. Fuller Day in Cape Coral. It is truly my honor to make these proclamations for those who served on that fateful day in our history. It is also a day to remember Craig T. Fuller, a man who dedicated his life to serving our country. The ceremony also brought the return of those who have a history with the statue that long predates the latest renovations. One of those people was Mike Gemmell. Without his rare insight and dedication, the statue most likely would have been lost forever. Gemmell, a community leader in Cape Coral for many years, was the individual who found the statue in the deserted rose gardens back in the early 1980s. It was Gemmell who led the first restoration efforts that saved the statue. My goal back in 1981 was to make this monument the focal point of Cape Coral, so that every ceremony in recognition of the military would always be at the base of the monument. I was very disappointed when Nations Bank back then decided to move the monument from my site on Vizcaya to where it is today. However, today I know that it was the right decision, that it is the perfect location for this historic statue.